Hey there, my wedding planning friends, and welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time here, thanks so much for clicking on my video. I'm Emily Summer. I'm a wedding planner based in Montana, and I make weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice. So with fall just right around the corner, I thought it'd be fun to do a video all about fall wedding trends, tips I have for having fall weddings, and also the trends that we can expect to see in fall weddings of this year. So like I said previously, I'll start with some overall tips for fall weddings and some things to keep in mind if you are thinking about doing a fall wedding or planning to do a fall wedding. And then I'll also talk about some trends that we are expecting to see for this fall and probably next fall as well if you are planning a 2023 fall wedding. So when it comes to having a fall wedding, I think a large part of the appeal of doing a fall wedding is the natural colors that you see during fall, right? I absolutely love fall for all of the change of leaves and the colors, and everything is just so vibrant before we have this change of a season. You can also get away with having things a little bit more cozy. You can have more comfort food. It's maybe not so hot as it is during a summer wedding, so there's a lot of appeal to having a fall wedding, but there's some things that you definitely want to keep in mind and consider if you are planning on having a fall wedding. And the number one is obviously the weather. I feel like there's a large appeal to having a wedding in the fall because of the weather, as it could likely tend to be cooler, especially than in the summer months. But depending on where you are in the world, weather can be very, very unpredictable during the fall. So here in Montana, I've had plenty of October weddings. October is a pretty popular time, and September, for weddings in Montana now. And I remember 2 years ago, I had a wedding in the middle of October, and it was 75 degrees and sunny and gorgeous. And the year before, I had a wedding on the exact same date, and it was snowing. So that just goes to show the drastic change and the unpredictability of the weather during the fall. So that is something to definitely keep in mind. So if you are thinking about having a fall wedding, or if you are planning for a fall wedding, make sure that wherever your venue is, you have a plan B, you have a backup option. So if your venue has an indoor space that you can move everything inside, if your plan A is to do it outside, then that's great and you're set and covered there. If you do not have an outdoor or an indoor option, and only have outdoor, I highly, highly, highly recommend renting a tent, having some sort of option so that if it does rain, if it does snow, if it is cold, you have some sort of protection for your guests to keep them comfortable, because one of the main things you want to keep in mind and be attentive to is the comfort of your guests. And this goes for any season that you plan to have your wedding, but especially in the colder months, or the months that it can be colder, and that is those fall and winter weddings. So keep in mind the weather will likely be unpredictable, and just make sure that you have a backup plan. And in addition to this, you're likely going to want to rent space heaters, or the propane heaters, especially if you are doing an outdoor wedding. If you're doing all indoor and you have like some outdoor options that people can go inside and outside, then you're pretty much covered here. But if you plan to do anything specifically outdoors, whether that is eating, dancing, ceremony, have some sort of option to keep guests warm. So propane heaters are a great way to do that, and then that way you have a space that people can mingle. Maybe your venue has a fire pit, definitely opt to use that. If you have lounge spaces, having blankets in these areas is a great option to keep guests cozy and comfortable and warm. Also, having blankets available during the ceremony, if you're doing a ceremony outside, another great way to keep your guests comfortable. A good rule of thumb is if you're having a wedding in the fall and the forecast is below 70 degrees at any point in the day, then you probably want to make sure that you're having space heaters. Like I said before, you could have a wedding in the middle of October, and depending on where you're at, it could be in the high 80s, it could be 90 degrees during the course of your wedding, and you probably don't need to worry too much about the comfort level of your guests as far as the cold goes. However, if you are somewhere where the temperatures do dip below 70, 65, especially at night, you definitely want to have some option to keep guests warm. Another thing to consider is the overall attire. So not only to kind of keep with the theme of having a fall wedding and make it seasonally appropriate, but you also want to consider, again, the weather and the temperature. And this goes for yourself and your bridal party, but also your guests. So for yourself, you perhaps might want to find a wedding dress that is somewhat seasonal when it comes to fall. Maybe that's something that has long sleeves, but don't solely base the choice of your wedding dress on the season. You don't need to have a fall wedding dress. A good thing to have, however, is regardless of the type of dress that you have, having layers is a great idea when it comes to a fall wedding. Not only will this help to keep you warm and comfortable, but it also looks great in fall photos. That way you're kind of keeping with the seasonal feel and overall kind of theme of your wedding day. So having like a pashmina, which is basically just like an oversized kind of blanket scarf, or even a fur, having some kind of jacket. Maybe if you're going a little more casual or rustic, having like a jean jacket. They have so many cute customizable options now, so you can kind of have that extra detail element and personalized element into your wedding photos as well. And this also goes for your bridal party. So maybe having some sort of uniform, pashmina or jacket or something that your bridal party can wear, maybe not during the ceremony, but during photos or later on into the night. So that way you're keeping everyone uniform, but also comfortable. You'll also probably want to opt for long dresses for your ladies as well. And this way, if it is really cold, you can also throw leggings on underneath a long dress, which is something that I have for sure done at a wedding before. And it's just that extra layer to keep your bridal party nice and comfortable. You also want to make sure that you are relaying this information to your guests. If you're having a fall wedding that is going to be outdoors, make sure that you are indicating that so that they can come prepared, so that they can be as comfortable as possible. So a great place to do this is on your wedding website. Let them know that, you know, this is going to be an outdoor wedding. Please dress appropriately. Make sure you have a jacket. It could get chilly. Whatever you want to say to be able to relay that to your guests, so that they are able to come prepared and be as comfortable as possible at your wedding. Another thing to consider with fall weddings is food and drink, and this is where it actually gets pretty fun, I think. When you have a fall wedding, you kind of lean into more of those fall trends, fall foods, and this is a great way to not only, again, keep everything kind of uniform and following this theme of fall, but also providing a more enjoyable experience for yourself and your guests as well. If it's a chillier day, your guests are probably not going to want or need those really light and refreshing and ice cold drinks like you have in the summer months. So, you know, the margaritas, the huckleberry lemonades that we have here in Montana, those types of things are very summery drinks. And for a fall wedding, you by no means have to make everything completely fall related and have everything cinnamon and pumpkin and all of that. But it's a great opportunity to kind of lean into that season a little bit more. So maybe you have an apple margarita, maybe you have something that's spiced in cinnamon, or if it's an especially chillier part of the year or chillier, colder day, having mulled wine or cider, maybe even like a hot toddy. This also goes for non-alcoholic options. So a lot of summer weddings, we see a lot of iced tea and lemonade as the non-alcoholic option, which you can still do in the fall, but maybe incorporating like a hot cocoa, tea, coffee bar is something that can be really nice and cozy for guests, and also a great way to, again, just kind of lean into that fall season. This also goes for the food that you provide. You can lean in a little bit more towards those comfort type foods, not having to have those light summer salads, going a little bit more comfort route, including vegetables and items that are seasonal is not only going to kind of tie in the whole theme of your wedding, but also going to be more cost effective and sustainable for you as well. Another thing to keep in mind with fall wedding is the overall timeline. So not only the timing of your specific wedding date, kind of in perspective to what else is going on, but also the timing of your actual day itself. So when I mean in the perspective to everything else going on, fall and winter is when, you know, the holiday seasons kind of start. So there's a lot of things to consider and work around when it comes to a fall wedding. So just keep that in mind, especially if you or a lot of your guests are people that are big sports people, or if you have a lot of families with children that play sports. That's something to keep in mind, as the fall season is when a lot of the major sports in the US take place. Football season especially, obviously school starts, so you're in the school season. So if families with children are in sports, a lot of times that takes place on the weekend, so travel might be involved. So just keep that in mind if you have a lot of guests that might fall into this category. You also obviously have holidays like Halloween and Thanksgiving to keep in mind, where if you have a lot of guests that are traveling, this could affect travel plans and flights and hotel accommodations. So if you are planning on having a fall wedding around these holidays, make sure that you're giving your guests ample amount of time to make their reservations for flights and for hotels before things get too super expensive or booked up. Now, when it comes to timeline of your actual day, this is something to keep in mind during fall weddings too, as the sun is likely going to set earlier than it does during the summer. So this being said, you want to make sure that you probably are having an earlier ceremony start time than you might during the summer months. So maybe this is like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That way you have plenty of time to still have all of the light that you need to get all the photos that you need. And this is something to discuss with your photographer. Maybe you have a earlier timeline, even if you want to, like if you want to have a later ceremony start time, you have an earlier start time for photos so that you can get all the photos done before your ceremony. And a lot of times photographers will schedule in sunset or golden hour photos, which during the summer, at least here in Montana, that typically happens after dinner and when guests are kind of getting ready to just kick off the dance floor and party for the rest of the night, where you have to be a little bit more strategic in factoring that into your timeline when it comes to a fall and winter wedding, because like I said, the sun is going to set earlier, it's going to get darker earlier, and a lot of times that golden hour sunset time is going to be right at dinner or maybe right after your ceremony time. So keep that in mind and try and strategically work that into your overall day of timeline when you are creating that. Finally, let's talk about the overall kind of decor and style when it comes to fall weddings. My biggest tip is to try and be cohesive with your surrounding rather than competing with it. So this is pretty easy to do in the fall. If you're having an outdoor wedding especially, you're likely going to be dealing with a lot of natural colors and changing colors. Maybe these are some vibrant colors, and you want to try and just tie in your overall theme and decor of your wedding into what's naturally found around you. That way you aren't doing any competing colors. You're not trying to completely change what's already present and already going to be naturally beautiful in your surroundings. Typically, this means leaning into a lot more darker colors, more bolder colors, a little bit more warm colors, and a little bit more of a natural color palette. Keep in mind that even though it's a fall wedding, that doesn't mean that you have to go all dark and moody. There are plenty of ways to incorporate fall color and a fall kind of overall feel and theme and still keep it somewhat light and bright. And you can do this by adding more lighter natural colors, so like taupes and beiges rather than dark grays and browns and black. And this will help lighten up your color palettes. Also, incorporating lighter pinks and blushes is something that we're seeing a lot in fall color palettes. And that way you can still kind of have those darker tones, but you're keeping it a little bit light, a little bit airier and prettier for a wedding, and not having everything just completely dark and moody. On this topic, I have a whole Pinterest board that I created that's all about fall 2022 wedding inspiration and trends and tips. So if you want to check that out, I'll link that in the description below. It's got all kinds of fun fall inspiration for you. So now let's talk about some fall wedding trends that I am seeing, expecting to see, and things that you can incorporate into your fall wedding. So like I kind of touched on before, bold colors is a big trend when it comes to fall weddings. So don't be afraid to include bold and bright colors. I think a lot of times we kind of reserve those bright colors for summer weddings, where you can have bold and bright colors maybe in a different hue and a slightly different color palette than you would in the summer, but doesn't mean you have to completely steer away from bold colors just because the season is changing and fall and winter is a little bit darker. Another trend that we are seeing in fall weddings and in weddings in general, but especially fall winter weddings, is the use of a black wedding dress. Now, this is something that isn't a huge trend, but it's definitely something that we are seeing gain traction. I've had a few people ask for black wedding dresses at my bridal store, Velvet Bride, which is something that I don't currently carry just because here in Montana it hasn't seemed to be a big trend yet, so we'll see if that changes. However, this is something that we are seeing in other parts of the world, in other parts of the country, that there is an increase in interest in utilization of a black wedding dress. Also, multicolored dresses for your bridal party. This has always been a trend for the last year or so, but even more so in the fall, and kind of bold colors, textures, the use of velvet and silk kind of mixed together is a trend that we are seeing for fall weddings. So like I kind of mentioned before with the colors, the red tones are very popular for fall right now. We're kind of steering away from the burgundy and orange and navy and dark green and kind of those darker, deeper colors that are typically popular for fall weddings, and leaning a little bit more towards these kind of warm and cozy red tones. So a lot of that terracotta, a lot of rust, copper, pairing it with lighter neutral colors, and like I mentioned before, the use of blush and pinks included in this as well. Dried flowers is another trend that has been popular all year, but especially in fall weddings. This is a great trend as it is pretty useful for a lot of people as fall and winter weddings. We're starting to kind of lose a lot of options when it comes to having fresh natural florals that are in season. So incorporating dried flowers is a great way to maintain the sustainability of your wedding and also help the cost of your wedding florals, while also kind of matching your surroundings as well. Lighting is another big trend that we have seen again all year, but especially in fall weddings as we're reaching this kind of cozy time of year. So lots of candles, a lot of ambient lighting, whether that is bringing in chandeliers and extra lighting, lamps into your space, lots of twinkle lights, lots of bulb hanging lights, and also the use of neon signs is super popular. Also, the whole boho trend lives on, especially in fall weddings. We're kind of transitioning from that summer beachy boho going into the more fall rustic type of boho style, and that is not going anywhere. And finally, intimate ceremonies are another trend that we are seeing a lot for fall. Again, kind of staying with this cozy, warm feeling and having a little bit smaller weddings with your guest count. Again, this is a trend that has been pretty popular in all of 2022, but we're seeing it move forward into the off season, into fall weddings, and creating just, again, that very cozy space and having a little bit of a smaller guest count through fall weddings. With fall just around the corner, I am so excited to see all of these fall trends start to take place into my fall weddings and moving into next year. I'm super excited to see what people come up with and get more inspiration for fall weddings. If you want some more inspiration and maybe some more tips and ideas for your fall wedding, I will link my Pinterest board below that is all about fall weddings for 2022 and everything that I'm excited about. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, please like and subscribe to get weekly videos on wedding planning tips and advice, and we'll see you next week.